Alright, so today we're going to talk about warriors. So what I'm going to start off with is, as usual, is with the traits. So what I am running right now in terms of traits is 00563. It's a bit unconventional. It's kind of like the Shout Warrior build, but it's kind of a bit different. But what I'm running in Adept is number 2 for defense, which is Dogged March. So this reduces the duration of incoming, CCs, frost, cripples, and immobilize.
User joined your channel.
And this is decreased by 33%, which you'll definitely need as a front line when you're staying on tag or trying to stay on tag. For master and defense, I have number 9 up. So cleansing ire. So each time you actually use your adrenaline, you actually remove conditions. This really helps when you're using your hammer stun. The thing is that the conditions are not removed until after the adrenaline is used. So I'll address that problem with conditions before the adrenaline is used in a little bit. And I went with 5 in defense is because the minor trait that you get in Grandmaster for defense, you convert your toughness into power. So you'll be really tanky as a warrior, so might as well get some more power out of it. In tactics, I have 6. For adept, I'm running 2. So you'll definitely need this in terms of using stuff like Shake It Off or for Great Justice. So it reduces the recharge on those skills. In master, I'm using number 9. So quick breathing. Reduced recharge time on Warhorn. Now the reason I like to run this is because when you actually trait that, your blast finisher, Call to Arms, your number 5 skill in Warrior, has the same time, cooldown time as the Empower for Guardians. So that works very well for frontline because when I stop to Empower, I know my empower skill will be off cooldown, and I'll wait a couple more seconds afterwards before I actually call it out again. So I'll call out empowers between every 18 to 20 seconds minimum. And because of this is that when I'm running the tag, it takes you guys 1 or 2 seconds to get to tag before you can actually use your empower skill. So I like to take that into consideration, and I wait 18 to 20 seconds for that. When the warriors are traded with number 9 in tactics, their blast finisher has the same cooldown as in power. So when I call for empowers and the LE drops a water field, your call to arms, I know your call to arms is ready to be used. Your blast finisher is ready to use when my empower is ready to be used. So whenever I ever call for empowers in the open field and I don't see blasts happening on the water field, that's what I kind of find frustrating because I know your Warhorn skill should be ready to be used. I know you also might run into the problem of your weapon swapping cooldown time, and I take that into consideration. I'll cover that in a little bit. For your Grandmaster, I have 13 in tactics. So shouts heal. So when you're using Shake It Off or for Great Justice, you can actually get some heals in. 1 second. And then for discipline, I have 3. Now in 3, the minor trait right off the bat in discipline is very effective. You gain adrenaline on weapon swap. So as a warrior, you constantly need to get your adrenaline up. And the reason for that, I'll cover that in a little bit. And then for your major trait in adept, I have number 3. So you move faster while wielding melee weapons. I prefer the mobility that provides, but you can switch that out for inspiring shouts. So gain adrenaline when using a shout. So either or works. It depends on how capable you are in staying on tag. Since I'm actually kind of new at playing warrior, I like to have warriors sprint oh no, yeah, warrior sprint on, so I have an easier time staying on tag. But
Yeah,
if
I
you
like
have
the.
no problem staying on tag, go for number 4. And then the minor trait for master and discipline, weapon swapping recharges faster. So warriors have the quickest recharge time in a Zerg, pretty much. So when it comes to getting those blasts in, there's not a lot of um, problems you should be having where you can't get a blast in because your weapon swapping is on cooldown. Because typically I'll call out empowers and water fields a few seconds beforehand. So even if you had like switched to your hammer and you had already, used your hammer stun or whatever, and then I call for empowers, by the time you actually stack up and get the water field down for blasting, it's already been more than 5 seconds. So you'll have enough time to get your blast in with that minor trait. And then for armor, I am running. Let me ping it 1 second. That is what I'm wearing in terms of armor. That is not the right armor. I just realized the helmet is wrong.
I was gonna say, I was like,
Yeah, there you go. So there you go. That's the right armor. So the second one, ignore the first one. So power, toughness, vitality.
Melandru said it has different stuff.
Yeah, I just noticed that for some reason. But yes, the second one. So power, toughness, vitality, and then runes of Melandru. This is preferable when you're doing the shout frontline style of gameplay, runes of Melandru, for the reduced incoming condition duration. So if you remember when, like from your traits, you have your major trait for your adept in defense, number 2. So you got your negative 33% condition duration from there, for CCs specifically. Then you get another 15% reduced time from the armor that you're wearing. And then the food that you should have at the very least is this food. So this is the cheap version. You can go for the more expensive version if you can actually swing it, but that's the cheap version. So in total, you should never be having any problems with condition on you. Couple that with your shake it off and the Pelagian flame rotation that you have with the 3 guardians in your party, which is the ideal group, is 3 guardians and 2 warriors. The front line should never have a problem with CCs as long as they're staying tight on tag. You're wearing the proper armor, the proper runes, you have the proper food on, the traits is set up perfectly, and then your rotation is set up perfectly. So that when all those stuff actually click together, the front line, should, walk through anything without a problem. For trinkets, you can be wearing a combination of Berserker, soldiers, Valkyrie, ascended gear, exotic gear, it's fine. If you don't have ascended, it's fine. There's not a huge difference between ascended and... Oh, there's my proper armor. Okay, never mind. Sorry. So you should be running something like PTV, if you could get your hands on ascended gear, or Valkyries or soldiers or whatever on your trinkets. And then if you find yourself surviving for a long time, you can switch to Zerker trinkets for increased damage output. So right now I'm running 2 Zerker trinkets because I find that it's pretty easy for me to survive as a frontline warrior. For weapons, let me ping them to you. So that's what I'm running for weapons. So for hammer, PTV, sigil is superior sigil of water, and then superior sigil of purity. Again, if you're having problems with conditions on you as a front line, I highly recommend getting sigil of purity, so that as you're taking damage, you also have a chance to get rid of the conditions on you, so it's easier for you to stay on tag. A
Can I just
replacement.
suggest a nice one?
Sorry, what was
I
that?
forget what it's called. Can I just suggest a nice sigil too?
Yeah, go ahead.
It's not stacking, but it's like a different form. But after like 5 kills, because each like stacking kill is 5 now, it gives you like 5 seconds of quickness, and in Zerg you use that, and you can get it like every 3 seconds and just do massive amounts of quickness with like an entire front melee.
Oh, that's a pretty cool thing. Yeah, that thank you for speaking up. Yeah, if you have any like improvements or suggestions, definitely speak up. This is the whole point of the training sessions, that everyone has their own unique style of play, and each person, knows something different that no one else knows. So, as if we can all like talk about our little personal preferences, we can get a lot out. I was gonna suggest the second sigil to be also Sigil of Fire. That's also a good sigil to run on your hammer as well. On your sword that you should be running at all times, as well is your. I use my as that as my stacking weapon. And then for the Warhorn, I have Sigil of Energy. So each time we stop to empower and you switch to your Warhorn, you get another dodge roll in. Because as a warrior, you'll be switching through your weapons constantly, especially with the reduced cooldown time. So it's always nice to get that extra dodge roll in, just in case.
Ew, yellows.
So the other things I learned with the runes, just to backtrack just a little bit, the other thing that some people enjoy, I don't. I prefer Melandru. It's right now I'm running Trooper for the shouts remove conditions from each affected ally, but I prefer Melandru. So that's the other one that warriors can use as a shout warrior.
Yeah,
But
definitely for the Shout Warrior frontline build. That's the original runes that people run. Is that one again? Yeah, I don't like it either. That's why I prefer Melandru.
I really prefer Melandru.
Yeah, because when you're using Shake It Off, you're typically not using it as a condition removal skill. You're using it as a Sunbreaker skill. That's as I believe is the primary focus for Shake It Off is a Sunbreaker. So yeah, that's the alternative. Like if you can't afford Runes in Melandru, yeah, you can go for that. Another alternative is for the Destroyer warrior build, and that's the Runes of Holbreck, which I suggest my Guardians to wear. But Runes of Holbreck on
Yeah.
the Warrior also work very well in terms of keeping up the amount of overall damage output. And Tiva here and there will throw down something to say in guild chat or in local chat, so you might as well just be like reading through that as well. Because Tiva's build, she typically likes to go, balls deep into a Zerg, but her build is actually kind of glassy. So she's able to actually run into a Zerg and deal great amount of damage, but also not die. So that's like the
User joined your
epitome
channel.
of damage dealing, is where you're able to go in with Zerker trinkets and pull out still being alive, and that can only occur when the front line is working together properly. Now, Double D did point out something earlier, where staying on tag is your primary focus as a frontline warrior or guardian, but people typically are too afraid to leap in. Now, I understand this fear of leaping in. When I call for leaps into a Zerg, I know it's pretty frightening to for me to say leap in on this location. There's like 10 guys over there, and there's like a lot of red rings and shit. And the first thought that goes to your head is like, if I leap in there, I'm gonna die, and people are gonna think I'm a shit player. That I used to have that same problem. If you're to like watch the videos of back from like ZOD when I was playing Frontline Guardian, I never swapped out of my loot stick. Like I never swapped out of my staff. I was constantly on my staff for the range pressure, so I would never be 100% on the tag because I was too afraid that if I were to stay on the tag, I would die and I'll get called out for it. But over time, I learned that when you actually leap in to a Zerg, you actually don't take a lot of damage. It looks like a lot of shit ton of damage when you're looking from a distance, but the initial leap that you do in there, for like the first few seconds, you don't take a lot of damage. You actually sustain most of that damage as soon as you leap in. And as more people leap in, you start mitigating the damage you would take later on. So the overall damage you do take when you actually leap into a fight is actually very, very minimal. And you'd be surprised how small, how insignificant the damage is when you actually leap in. That's why, like, when I'm commanding, I like fearlessly leap in whenever. And it's because I know for the first 3 seconds when I'm leaping into a Zerg, I won't take damage, and that's enough time for you guys to leap in right after, and also mitigate the damage I would take over time. So there shouldn't be any big problems with you guys to leap in. And again, when the Guardian leap actually has a longer cooldown than the Warrior leap. So whenever my leap is off cooldown on my Greatsword, I know the Warrior's leap will be off cooldown as well. And this is because I'm assuming you guys don't use your skill out of turn. You know, you use your skills when it's necessary to be used, so that when we all use our skills together, it has a greater effect, instead of you using it whenever you feel necessary. I highly suggest for this use of leaping in to take off your auto-targeting. So what you should do is go into your options, and then when you see the combat movement on the first tab, ground targeting should be fast with range indicator for all our ranged, and also for your banner, which I'll talk about a little later. But you know, take off stop auto targeting on target change, and take off auto targeting. So when you're switching through a Zerg, you're not automatically targeted onto someone, and then when I call for leaps, you end up leaping the wrong way. A lot of people do have that problem where they start leaping the wrong way, and they're too far away from the tag to be any use to anybody. And as soon as you find yourself all alone by yourself, just assume you're dead, because as soon as you're a frontline person who's not
User
on the
joined your
tag,
channel.
you are essentially, you know, a dead man walking. So make
And
sure. Go ahead.
I was going to say, and using your Savage Leap is also very handy on retreating. You don't have to use a stun breaker. Well, you do if you're completely immobilized, but you can jump pretty far, so you can get away a lot better with that. I use that all the time as my retreating skill,
Yeah,
especially with that.
yeah,
I'm
that,
glad you mentioned taking off auto targeting because it's very important.
yeah,
I know right away when I
perfectly, yeah.
have it on.
And especially when you're retreating, if you have auto targeting on and you're trying to run away, you'll end up leaping backwards back into the Zerg, and you're fucked. So that's quickly the armor. So power, toughness, vitality. An alternate, which I really don't suggest for our more beginner to intermediate warriors, is PPT. But for right now, to stick with PTV. If you cannot afford runes of Melandru in terms of the gold, I recommend you go to the Melandru Temple in Cursed Shore and buy it from the Karma. So you can get it from the Karma vendor. The only one that isn't PTV, I believe, is like, for instance, the boots. The boots won't be PTV; they'll be a different stat.
Just
So
the
you'd,
boots and helm.
yeah, boots and helm. So you'd have to buy those two. So that's about 16, 17 gold. But in the overall run, you'll be saving a lot more gold that way. So we got the hammer and then sword, warhorn. These are three must-have weapons for all warriors. Trinkets, start off with PTV or Valkyrie if you're going exotic, and then start swapping them out for Zerker trinkets as you realize you can take, you know, you see that you're surviving for a longer period of time. You can start switching that for Zerker. Any questions so far about armor, runes, sigils, weapons, trinkets, or traits? No, I haven't been reading the local chat or the guild chat, but I'm pretty sure that, you know, some people are actually throwing out some interesting stuff in there and not really paying attention. Alright, so moving on to your skill bar. So we'll start off with the healing skill. Healing skill, I'm running Healing Signet. Now, the reason I run Healing Signet is because of the passive heal that you get from it. So 380 heal passive. This works very, very well with the Guardian passive heal once they trait for it. So the F2 skill for the Guardian, their passive healing will be a group healing passively. So when you have that couple with the passive healing from the warrior, the Guardians are actually providing higher sustain for the warriors. So you'll end up getting well over 700 healing per second, which can really help when you're taking DOT or damage over time from your CCs. Other stuff that I go ahead.
Sorry. One thing, I don't know if you said it or not, but in Defense 4, Healing Signet works really well with adrenal health. It'll basically heal you up if you just get out for like maybe a solid 20 seconds and then jump back in. Or even just like pulling back to you and then going back out.
Yeah, that's another great point. There's also the ability for warriors to heal passively based on how much adrenaline they have. So, use your adrenaline wisely, like for your hammer stuns, for instance. Don't just, randomly throw it out there. Make sure when you're actually using your hammer stun, you're not taking away the passive healing ticks that you actually need. So, just be aware of that. Just pay attention to your health bar and the situation around you before you use your hammer stun, because you don't want to lose that passive healing ability that the hammer stun the adrenaline would provide for you otherwise.
Unless it's going to take out like some key person or turn the tide of the battle or just keep it going. Unless
Yeah,
someone calls
exactly.
for it.
Exactly. So what you want to do is read the situation before you actually use it. I understand a lot of people joke around that playing a warrior is just like rolling your face on the keyboard, but in these kind of situations, you want to actually kind
User
of pay
joined your
attention.
channel.
Other skills that I recommend are Balance Stance and Endure Pain. You can also run double stability by running Doliath Signet, but that's up to you. It depends on the situation that you're in. Like for instance, if you're in a party with only like one guardian or no guardian, then yeah, you'd want to run double stability. Otherwise, you want to run Endure Pain as your oh shit skill to get out of a tight situation. For your elite, all warriors should be using Battle Standard. As of right now, we have no use for kill shot warriors. So I prefer that if anybody here is a kill shot warrior to switch to hammer, sword, warhorn, because we actually don't have we're not in the position where we can actually we don't have the luxury for kill shot warriors or the luxury for a pick team right now, because right now we're still working on the basics. So I'd highly recommend it if there's any warriors out there that are running kill shot to start working towards the builds we're talking about right now. And as soon as the group grows, like our front line grows, then we can have the luxury of switching from some of our warriors to kill shot. So the two builds you can be running are the Destroyer Warrior build or the Frontline Shout Heal build. Destroyer Warrior build is preferably for those people who are more expert in using the warrior. Otherwise, I highly suggest everybody running their Shout Heal build. The Destroyer Warrior build is... Give me 1 second. I know there is some theory crafting in that build, but there might be 00446. Another one that can be used is 00644. So 6 in defense, 4 in tactics, 4 in discipline. And then the runes you'd be running is Runes of Holbreck. So that's an alternative. If you find that you can use that build while surviving, then yeah, go for it, definitely. But that typically takes away from your blast finishers, because some commanders will ask those warriors to run hammer and greatsword, so it reduces the blast finishers we can get. But that's, you know, for usually bigger groups. We run pretty small, so that's fine. Why Holbrack? So Holbrack is for the destroyer warrior build. The reason why you want to run Holbrack is because it increased the duration of might. So essentially what you can be getting is, if we get our stacks in perfectly, like at the beginning of a fight, we run in, we empower, and then we pull off, the empower can last up to 45 seconds. So having 25 stacks of might lasting for 45 seconds, you'll be doing a, you know, crap load of damage. And yes, also for the Holbrack, you also get Condi clear off of it as well. So you also get that sustain from CCs, but you also get that massive burst damage. So the primary purpose of Holbrack is the higher damage. The secondary purpose is the reduced condition duration. So Holbrack is a great rune to run besides Melandru. Now, in terms when you're looking at your sword warhorn skills, so your number one skill is something, you know, you'll be spamming through a group when we're trying to get from one location to another. You use your Savage Leap in only 2 situations. 1, when I call for leaps. 2, to get out of a tight situation. But besides that, you know, use that conservatively. You can also try, like, if you have really good map awareness, you can use that as a leap finisher as well. So aim when you use it. Don't aim just to get onto my tag location, but if you see a well or a field in front of you that you want to get a leap finisher into before getting to tag, yeah, position yourself, you know, step one way, or like 1 step right, 1 step left, and get that leap finisher in. Final thrust is great to finish off the squishy targets that we'll typically run into. So before they can get away, use your final thrust. But typically you'll be running your hammer when we're leaping, after we leap into a location, but you can definitely use your final thrust to finish off a target pretty quickly. Warhorn number 4 skill. This skill should always be on cooldown, no matter what. This skill should be used constantly and effectively and offensively. Just don't use it for your open field movements. A lot of warriors forget to use this in open field movements, but this should be constantly using open field, but also constantly using Zerg. So whenever you have your sword warhorn out, use this skill because it's very effective. I mean, just read the skill alone, you get rid of your CCs. And you get swiftness, because the entire point of a Zerg fight is to have mobility for your people and CCs on theirs. Because mobility wins fights. That's pretty much it. Blast finishers. Only use this skill when I call for it. Otherwise, try to avoid using it. Because a lot of commanders will have a gauge in their mind that will figure the cooldown times for all their everybody's skills. And if you use this blast finisher for some reason in the middle of a Zerg fight when it's not called out, and then the commander calls for a restack and a water field, and your blast finisher is not ready, you know, you're screwing over the group. You're not just screwing yourself over, you're screwing over the group. And so when you use your skills, think of the party first, think of yourself second. The only reason...
Disconnected from your channel.
Go ahead.
Sorry, Xylon. I was just gonna say the only time the warrior and I play
User
warrior
joined your channel.
99.9% of the time. The only time I ever blast it without the commander calling it, is on restack, because I'm expecting empowers, I'm expecting water. If the waters aren't there, I'm still blasting it because that's what I'm supposed to do. It should be just all there all during that time. So it should just be blasted on restack when everything. Xylon would call empowered. I'm blasting and water's going pretty much instantly. So that's why if the waters aren't called, warriors are just blasting nothing. So it has to be all 3 consecutively.
Yeah, and when you, like, if the Ellie is not calling out water fields, for instance, if they don't have a mic, or like if I don't
User
call for
disconnected
blast
from your
because
channel.
I forget to call a blast, The thing is that pay attention to the ground. Once you see the ground turn blue, then you use your blast finisher. Just don't like, run into a stack and then use your blast finisher. Pay attention. And when you're pulling off the stack, like the commander starts moving again, keep your eyes on the ground because an LE might be a bit late when throwing down their water field, and they won't call it. So make sure you just wait a couple of seconds. Keep your warhorn out just in case that LE finally gets to the tag and drops a water field, before the commander leaps into his Zerg. That way you can get your blast in before the LD calls it out, or even if the commander doesn't even notice it, you can still get that blast in right there. Pay attention, like I'm using charge right now, and you see how everybody around me got the swiftness skill, like the swiftness buff? This skill is OP, there's no limit to this skill. So use it effectively, use it aggressively, because it affects everybody around you.
User left your channel.
So just pay attention, like those like simple like visual indicators. You just gotta pay attention to that kind of stuff. So like if you see someone running alongside you and they're like limping, they're crippled. So use your charge, get the cripple off of them, and let's keep moving. So hammer. Hammer's main goal is the adrenaline skill, Earthshaker. So your hammer stuns. Now your hammer stun has the same range as your leap skill. So the leap skill on your sword, and then the hammer stun on your the range for both of them is exactly the same. So the range is actually pretty long for the hammer stun. So when you call out, like when we're leaping into a group and we're using hammer stun, you can use your hammer stun as a leap for the initial engage, and the range of the stun is actually pretty massive. So make sure when you're using it, aim for multiple targets instead of single targets, if all possible. Also, it is a blast finisher, so when I call out for wells on the enemy group, you can blast the wells. Or if an LE drops a water field on the enemy group, right when we're leaping in, you can get those blasts of water and heal the front line as we're engaging them, as we're actually pushing into them. One thing warriors should take note of is its conditions. If you're blind when you're using your hammer stun, you're essentially wasting your hammer stun. So what more pro warriors will do is that they'll have their skills keybind, right? So when they're using the hammer stun, and right before the hammer stun actually hits the ground, they'll use shake it off. That way, if you have blind on you, you can get rid of the blind before the hammer hits the ground, and you can get the stun on the group. Otherwise, you'll just be ruining your stun. So make sure you're looking at your conditions, use your shake it off wisely. You have to use your eyes before you shake it off. Don't like run into a Zerg and start throwing out shake it off whenever you want. Make sure when you use shake it off, use it primarily for a stun breaker. Or like if you're chilled and you're falling behind, then use it. But essentially, use it as a stun breaker and use it again as to remove blind when you're actually using your hammers. Another skill hammers warrior should be using with a hammer is number 3 skill, to use that effectively and constantly, because the cripples that it provides will keep your targets within range of the front line. So as long as you keep your targets CC'd and controlled, it's easier to kill them. So make sure you use your cripples to slow down your targets in front of you so you can easily finish them off. Staggering blow should be used cautiously. Do not just face roll your keyboard when you're using your hammer, because if you're using a knockback on a target we're trying to kill, you're kind of screwing up the the rhythm of the front line. So just be careful about that kind of stuff. If you're traded for it, you can turn these cripples into possible immobilize for a second. So that works as well. If you want to trade into that, that's great. To keep the enemy group CC'd properly. But again, all this stuff can only work if we're leaping in at an appropriate amount of time. Because if you can't kill a target within 3 seconds, then you're wasting time. So the ideal thing is that when we leap into the group, we get at least one person down within 3 seconds. If we're not able to get at least one person down within 3 seconds, we're not doing our job. We're not playing properly. So make sure you actually hit hard and hit on time. So the fear of leaping in and dying, you guys need to slowly start getting over it. Just do it, Just leap in and just, trust the instincts and trust the people in your party will be doing the same thing at the same time. And we can all just leap in perfectly at the same time, hit a target at the same time, and within 3 seconds kill somebody really, really quickly. Because if you have to wait more than 3 seconds to kill somebody, we're wasting too much time on the front line. We're paying more attention to individual targets than the overall field combat. Because these Zerg fights is about playing the field, not the individual. So if you're playing for an individual trying to get that one person down, you're losing the fight automatically. So play the field, don't play the individual. That includes squirreling off. Do not squirrel off. Let our backline deal with anybody who has like at 5% health, Let our mesmers, let our LDs, let our necros take care of that situation for us. Because those backliners can behave as pick with their secondary weapons like necro's axe or mesmer's greatsword. They can use that as a pick for themselves. So don't worry about that stuff. Trust that our backline will take care of it for us. Any input from Double D?
Well, the one thing as a frontline, just to add into the just jump in, never worry about what's there. You're just attacking the commander at all times. So you shouldn't worry about who's there. If the commander feels like he can push, we should push. We just follow the commander. Um, it's one of those things where if I jump in as a guardian, they have 3 seconds. You were saying, Xylon?
Yeah, we should aim for 3 seconds.
So as a warrior, if I'm jumping in alone, I find that I get a lot of single target on me. As a guard, you might have a little more sustain. I don't know. I don't play it as often, but for me, if I'm the only one jumping in or a few jumping in, they hit me hard. So the more people jump in, the easier it is on everyone as a group. So we're just going in with the commander, hitting at the exact same target, and we'll all benefit on that one attack.
Yeah, the thing about warriors is that they have great initial sustain for the initial engage, but the longer the fight lasts, it's harder for the warrior to stay standing. So that's why people prefer to hit warriors over guardians, because guardians can sustain over time. Warriors have a more difficult time because the healing skill that they have only heals for 3,000, and you might have well over 28,000 health. So the amount of healing you can actually provide for yourself is very, very minimal. So that's why we need to go in as a group, because the passive healing that the guardians provide for the warriors, and then the CC removal that the warriors provide for themselves and the other guardians, frontline has to work together. So the thing is, you have to trust everybody in the frontline will be doing their job perfectly. Because when you do it together, you'll see that frontline hits really hard. And when you're looking at enemy Zergs like AGG or EP or VR, these guilds, when they come and they like wipe an entire group, one of our groups, the first things that'll pop into your head is like, man, their frontline is really tight. And the reason they can wipe so quickly and so easily is because their frontline is so tight. And even the most mediocre group, if you have a tight front line, you can destroy everything. It's one of the things that Dodds would point out. Like, even if you're a pug group, but the front line runs really tight, even a pug group can take on a guild group easily, as long as their front line stays tight. So you just hold in that trust. And if you're having problems with conditions, the build that I provided for you, you'll have reduce condition duration for CCs by like 80-90%. So conditions should not be that big of a problem.
Yeah, conditions definitely not an issue.
Any questions, comments, concerns about a warrior? Because I know a few people are having trouble playing warrior, staying on tag, hitting an exact location, or anything like that. Any problems you guys are having with warriors in general?
So have you guys actually looked at force skill? You need to look at force skill and see what it does. It's absolutely phenomenal. Anyone who doesn't play it often, just take a quick look and see what it does. It's brilliant. So you in a fight, always spam. Distance is pretty good. It's I don't know. It's probably your most important skill during a battle, and then on exiting, it's your call of arms. Very important. Those two there, those shouts with your warhorn, save everything as far as I'm concerned. I think Xylon said it best. OP.
Typically, in terms of dodging, yes, calls to arms will sometimes save you from. But the thing is that when you're using calls to arms, you're typically pulling at your warhorn on restacks. So you'd be running your hammer through a group, and a call for a restack and a power use. You pull out your warhorn. You get your 50% of your endurance back for dodge roll. You use your call to arms, and yes, you can get increased endurance regeneration. So by the time you actually re-engage into enemy Zerg, you'll have 2 dodge rolls ready. Use your dodge rolls conservatively. Make sure you use it trying to get through a red circle. Don't try to use your endurance, like you run into a red circle, you get CC'd, and then you try to dodge roll through that. Because a dodge roll when you're crippled or chilled is a dodge roll wasted. So make sure you dodge roll before you get into an area of CC instead of in the middle of the CC area, because then you're wasting your dodge rolls. So pay attention to little things like that. Pay attention to the red rings, pay attention to blue puddles on the ground, and then stick to tag. You can also use your Savage Leap to try to catch up to the tag during a Zerg fight as well. That's what I often do, is use my leap skills to try to get to the tag pretty quickly. Because at first I was afraid to stay on tag because I was afraid of dying, but now I've kind of over time changed to where if I'm away from the tag, I start getting scared of dying. So if you're there to see me following another commander, I'm on them I'm on them to the point that I'm on to the point that I feel like I'm annoying them, because I'm literally on top of them constantly in open field fights. I'm just constantly stuck to them like a afraid little child, So even in Zerg fights, you're constantly on that tag, and you should be so close on the tag that if you're looking down on your character, it looks like you have the blue tag over your head instead of the commander. That's how close you should be. So as long as you stay on that tag really tight, the longer you survive and the harder we'll hit. Because if we can get multiple hammer stuns, and also another thing, just remembered, when you're calling out hammer stuns, you're supposed to call out the hammer stuns, but make sure you stagger your hammer stuns. Don't have 4 warriors using hammer stuns at the exact same time, because you're wasting it. When a warrior calls out hammer stuns, you wait for a second and then use your hammer stun and call it out. Wait for a second, someone else uses their hammer stun. Because if you have 4 hammer stuns going at the same time, the stun duration doesn't stack. So make sure you're paying attention. Wait a fraction of a second or something like that, and then use your hammer stun. So make sure you pay attention to stuff like that. What you can do is use the banner rotation number as the hammer stun rotation number. That way, you don't actually accidentally overstack your hammer stuns. And when you're using your hammer stuns, be sure to aim in front of your target, not behind your target. That way, when you actually leap into hammer stun an enemy, you fall in front of them and then stun him. And then you can cleave on top of him. But if you use your hammer stun behind them and have to run up to them to catch up to them to cleave them, your stun duration might go off by that time. So when you're using hammer stun, aim carefully. Aim in front of your target, not behind your target.
Yeah, it's only a maximum of 2 seconds stun. So
Yeah,
if you're
that's
at 3 bars,
that's essentially why I'm saying like within 3 seconds we should kill something, because if the enemy is not stunned anymore, the enemy is going to get away. And we can't rely 100% on our backline to throw down the CCs. Because sometimes our backline will have trouble throwing down the CCs, like chills and cripples. So frontline should worry about frontline, backline should worry about backline. But if everything is pulled out perfectly, we get our hammer stuns in, and then the backline does their job of getting the CCs in, we can hit an area longer than 3 seconds and get more downs, get more Doritos out of it. Any other questions, comments, concerns?
yeah, I just bought mine too, Griff.
Yeah. Like I said in Sage Chat, immobilize is what's been killing me since the last patch. Conditions aren't bad, it's just the immobilize and then I can't move.
So I think you missed the first few minutes, right, Griff?
I did, yeah, I was drinking beer.
Alright, so what I was talking about when you're not here, so the build I'm running is 00563 in your traits. In defense, for the first major trait, I have Dogged March, number 2.
Yep, same here.
Right? And then we have Runes of Melandru, so you got reduced condition duration from there. And then the soup.
Yep.
You're running that soup.
Yes.
And then you have your charge, which reduces cripples, immobilize, and chill. And then you have your shake it off, which removes conditions as well. And then you have the purging flame rotation for your guardians in your group. So if you're suffering from immobilize and you're using all your warrior capabilities, the Warhorn number 4, your shake it off, the proper runes, the proper traits, then the problem is not you, the problem is the guardians. And I understand our guardians are having a bit of a trouble with their purging rotations. I never hear it in a Zerg fight. People often don't set it up with their team, and I often don't see guardians using it appropriately. So it's something guardians and warriors will have to work out together. And don't be afraid of calling out the guardians in your party, saying you don't have stability or saying you're suffering from conditions. Make them feel responsible for you dying. Because if you're using everything perfectly and you're still having problems, then yes, it's the guardian's fault, not yours.
Dragon brand behind it.
No, they're running away already. Unless you guys want to fight them.
Anyways, I do have to go, guys. Have a good night.
Alright, later, Kibs. Thanks for typing, by the way.
Yeah. You're the best you could.
Later, Kibbs.
User disconnected from your channel.
Okay, who dropped the black line agent?
Trading post? That was me.
Darn it. I wish I would have noticed it before I waypointed.
Needed to get my runes.
Alright, if you have nothing else you guys want to cover, or any problems that you guys are having, it's a pretty quick session. Warriors are extremely fun to play as, really easy to play as. In my opinion, they're like the easiest class in the game.
I would have to agree. That's why I'm hoping to switch soon.